Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, the USA Today NFL wire site covering the Arizona Cardinals. Recording on a Tuesday night with Seth Cox from RevengeOfTheBirds.com, Arizona, the SB Nation Arizona Cardinals site, and also one of the hosts of the original Draft Breakdown podcast. Seth, we're finally here at week one. This normally, so in how we're doing shows, Tuesday will be our basically our game review. And so you'll get that Wednesday morning. I mean, ideally we could do it earlier, but life and Sundays are hard because football games. We don't want to get on the microphone that quickly. And Monday, Seth got his podcast, and I've got stuff going on. So, but Seth, are you ready? Are you ready for actual football that counts and more subterfuge and Jonathan Gannon telling us things that don't really tell us anything?
Yeah, it's going to be fun, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's going to be interesting for the first couple of weeks while we wait to see we're going to talk about it obviously, but is this to you just Gannon having fun with a guy that was basically, was a division rival for the last 2 years while he was in Philly and just, because let's be honest, there's no, like you said last week, there's no advantage. They're preparing for Joshua Dobbs the same. Like, this is just Gannon having some fun, right? Like that's what I'm kind of taking from this whole thing.
He was on. They had Gannon on Burns and Gambo today on Tuesday, and he got that from Sirianni. Now, I will say this. Gannon, if there's one thing we know, he is ultra competitive, and so if there's any competitive edge, he's going to take advantage of it. In this case, he's going to force them to do a little extra. Not that, let's be honest. Nobody's doing extra work to prepare for Dobbs over Tune because they're really kind of the same guy. They are. They are the same guy. They have. Tune
right
has
now,
two fewer starts as an NFL rookie that Dobbs has in 7 seasons.
Well, and that's what I was going to say right now. Like, the one thing you might get is that the unknown of Tune. Like he uses his athleticism just a touch more. But outside that, you're not gonna, like you said, you're not gonna see anything that you're gonna be like, oh, this isn't. Tune, we talked about this before the draft because Tune was one of the guys I really liked, right? Like, he is one of the most athletic quarterbacks, but he's one of the most athletic, like, normal athlete quarterbacks, not
right.
Kyler
This is not
Murray,
like Kyler, right?
Yeah, Lamar Jackson type athlete. Like, he's not even Josh Allen level athlete. He's maybe like a Kenny Pickett type of athlete, So yeah, it's funny to see that, thinking that there's going to be any type of advantage drawn from that. But I truly just think
I'm sure it is gamesmanship.
Yeah,
and I honestly, Gannon hates telling us things. He hates revealing anything. Like he also said, the team knows. Like, they know in the building what the plan is. Now, unless the plan changes, like, they know, which means it's Dobbs. We've heard this from enough people. That's why they traded for him. That's been suggested the whole time. Dobbs is going to be the starter, as much as that sort of, I don't know, whatever. I am very whatever on Josh Dobbs because, with the little bit of hope, hope that I had about Colt McCoy, I don't have that much hope in Josh Dobbs. That's the stupid thing.
No, and that's, it's not stupid. It's just realistic. We've seen what he is. He's going to manage the game. He's going to miss throws. He's not going to, make plays. But, the iteration of what Colt had become, let's be honest, was probably worse at this point.
I guess I guess. I just felt that even a washed up McCoy might be a better playmaker than the Dobbs. But what I envision with Dobbs is not last year Geno Smith. It was 2021 coming into when he was starting for Russell Wilson, Geno Smith, which was highly uninspiring.
Right, and that's probably accurate.
But I didn't send you this for prep, and I just forgot. Like, what was your take? Because this has been fun on the internet. What was your take on Jonathan Gannon on Flight Plan? Because the internet has really had some fun with this. And I'll admit, the only thing I took away from that whole speech that he said, that it wasn't too whatever. The only thing that I'm surprised that the Cardinals put out there is because Gannon has promoted football violence from the beginning, and I know that can be a little on the touch, but he wants players to play violent, and to say that he wants effing killers, even though the way he says it. Like he's not super. He's high energy, but he's not like the big inspirational speaker. So more of an energy. What was your take on how Gannon was portrayed in Flight Plan?
I didn't understand the preview clip that they sent out because I don't think it put him. Not that it put him in a bad light, but it just didn't put him in a way that made him seem like a strong leader at the time. Whereas the actual speech itself, I think, was better. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, and that's the thing is, like, you go to the Cardinals YouTube page, which is the only place Flight Plan is available, right? And it's not like the, let me take a look here real quick. Flight Plan has 39,000 views. 39,000 views, which is similar to the amount of downloads that this podcast gets. Like, that's not something that.
So, right. Okay. That's actually a really good point, is that particular clip on Twitter/X has made the rounds when the actual
substance of the speech is much different.
That is true. It is true. I will say that I do see, like, when they mention Kendall Roy, I see that. I totally believe it because Jonathan Gannon gives off confident Kendall Roy vibes, not the doubting himself Kendall Roy vibes, but definitely the, like, when he's like, I can effing do this. That is the Kendall Roy that I see Jonathan Gannon as most of the time. I can totally see that when people make that comparison.
Well, and so to finish that thought, the Adam Schefter tweet, just the Adam Schefter tweet, has 8 million views. So, like, that's the thing is, like, none of the actual substance is getting out there. And so it was an odd choice in a bevy of odd choices. I mean, remember when Gannon, the first video, like the introduction, and everybody thought that
the Gannon,
well, not just that, but then the Gannon of running to meet Kyler, they're like, oh, that's just so staged. It's so ridiculous. And it's like, this is the team's media. Like, what are we doing? Like, you can dictate how this works. Like, you don't have to post those things. And it just, yeah. And so I wish that was more cognizant, like, get a group of fans together and be like, hey, what do you think of this? And before you post things. But outside of that, I mean, like I said, I thought the actual substance of what happened wasn't bad. I thought it was actually, I think what he's wanting and what he's trying to, get out there to people makes a lot of sense.
Oh, totally. And the part, like, the people take, because when the camera pans out to the players, they're just kind of, they have the kind of the glazed eye. I don't know if I've ever seen a team meeting, like a clip of any team meeting where players were fired up, because they're all focused on learning. Like, even when on Hard Knocks when Robert Saleh talks about like on when Robert Saleh on one of the most recent I think it was the first episode of Hard Knocks this season and during the preseason, and he talks about like the Ravens or the Crows and Eagles, and it sounded just as hokey, and the players weren't like, raw, yeah, let's be Eagles. They were taking notes, just like the Cardinals players. They were just taking notes when Robert Saleh was trying to make the points that he wanted the Jets to be Eagles and not to, die from the pecking of the Crows. He just, soar higher and higher until the Crows just die. But yeah.
I know, and that's just it. I mean, it's just coaches are inherently cheesy at times because you're trying to motivate people that a lot of people don't have. What's the word? Like, and this isn't calling him out. This is nothing. Like, I'm not saying I'm hearing anything. Like, this is literally just an example. A guy like DJ Humphries, he doesn't need to be motivated. He's either going to do it and work hard or he's not. And so if he doesn't buy into whatever's being sold, which he seems like he is right now. Right. There's nothing that can be done about it. And so, yeah, like those guys might blow him off is probably not the right term, but they might just be like, whatever, it's coach, and so that's the thing is like, you have to remember that the motivation sometimes isn't for the total, it's or the whole, but it's for some of those guys because, a guy like Budda Baker, he's self-motivated. he doesn't need to be motivated, but a guy like
Kyler doesn't need motivation, right? But this is for like, well, he talks about great players. He's trying to create some self-reflection. Like DJ, it was when DJ came in, or like even like Zaven Collins, they could come in, this is how it's going to be. All right, then let's do that. It like it wasn't like, oh, what the hell? When Zaven got called out for eating breakfast in the team meeting, he wasn't like, what? No, he's like, oh, that's how this is. This is the norm. Okay, it's just establishing kind of the norm. So yeah, it's not for the team leaders, but it's probably for the guys that are battling for a roster spot. So what can you do differently? What do I want? I want killers. I want football killers on the field. And if you are that, you are going to be my guy.
Yeah, and it's just, he's trying to construe what he's looking for. I mean, I can talk about it all day as a coach. Like tonight was September 5th. Like it was our first like practice of the season for our youth team. And like, I've got 30 kids on the team. And so half of them, they either don't want to be there or they don't want to be at practice, so it's like, no matter what I say or do is not going to necessarily motivate them. And they, so finding ways to motivate and to reach people is done in a different way. And one of the most effective ways, like for me, is to be able to be like, hey, this guy is going to play in front of you unless you work harder. And so, that's basically what Gannon's doing is like, hey, this is what I'm looking for. Like, are you willing to sacrifice? Are you willing to, show me that you're going to do that? Or are you going to just simply, collect a check and get out of here? That's what the question becomes. And I thought it was impressive that he's telling the guys what he wants. And so we'll see how that goes.
So let's move from that. What we actually want to talk about on this edition of the show. So the Cardinals, after their 53-man roster was set, they've made some roster moves. It grabbed a whole bunch of guys off waivers. We've got the first depth chart. I think we've got some captains, and then we've got some other nonsense that's going back around the media with Kyler Murray. We thought we had avoided for long enough, but no, it doesn't. So let's start. Let's go ahead and start now with waiver claims and the depth chart. I figured the Cardinals would be active on the waiver claims. I didn't think they were going to be this active. Over the course of 3 days, they claimed 6 players, 4 offensive linemen, a tight end, and a safety. The safety, completely predictable, Kayvon Wallace. But I don't, I think the biggest thing for me was with Dennis Daly and John Gaines getting hurt. Doesn't it basically tell you that they only trusted, like they had an 8-man, they had 8 linemen they trusted. Now they only have 6, and they're just like, we're gonna figure something out. Doesn't that feel like, because they got 3 guys who can play center, or are going to, or are centers, or are projected to be centers. And that's kind of feels like they're just, let's see what we can get, because they didn't love the other guys on the roster, obviously, but their starting lineup plus Kelvin Beachum, I think that's all that they trust in terms of their offensive linemen right now.
Yeah, and that makes it really difficult, right? That when you only trust 6 guys, and inherently in the NFL, injuries occur. So how is that going to play out? Because they don't have John Gaines at all this season. He's done. And then obviously Dennis Daly's out for the first 4 weeks at least. So, they're going to have to get comfortable with 1 or 2 of these guys, or just hope that, you get a guy that steps up into the role and kind of fills those shoes. But it's just disappointing that, Marquise Hayes or Lacita Smith didn't grab that opportunity when they had it. But it's not unexpected for 5th and 6th round guys to not do so. So
yeah.
it's
Lacita, the writing was on the wall, and Hayes making the roster initially, and he's back on the practice squad now. So, I mean, they like him clearly, but they're not like, oh, he's definitely our backup guard, which to bring a guy off the streets that you've never played, I guess he's technically off the streets, he was playing, but I'm very intrigued by a couple of them. Because Tristan Colon, that's not a bad guy to have off the bench. He started a couple of games. He's basically Yelda Frohold, right, in terms of his career so far. And then he's been in the league for a little bit. The guy that seems to be the most intriguing, just from what Kyle Madsen told me about him, and what also Justin Mello over for the Draft Network, is that the kid that they got out of Hawaii, that they picked up from the 49ers, Ilm Manning, is super intriguing, because he was a left tackle all through college. He started, 40 games or 60 games or something like that. Like, he played 5 years at Hawaii.
Yeah.
But the interview that Mello had with him suggests that he saw himself, he knew he was going to be an interior guy, but he played left tackle because, obviously he was their best blocker. That was the best lineman they had on Hawaii, so he played left tackle. He sees himself playing interior, and he honestly could see himself playing center. And so I know that he's one of those late round kind of, draftnik favorites, but he didn't find a place on the roster with the 49ers, and the hope was to get him on the practice squad and convert him to guard. And right now he's listed as the backup left guard, I think it is.
Yeah, they dropped their actual depth chart today. Do you think that's, and I know we're going to talk about it, but do you think that's outside of the obvious starters? Do you think that's?
I never know what to do with that. I'm guessing, so since they have to have 8 guys active, my guess is that they will have Beachum, Cologne, and either Manning or Keith Ismail as the 8th lineman. Carter O'Donnell, who they've listed as the backup left tackle, I'm guessing he's their developmental guy-ish kind of guy, but that Cologne's going to be active on game days as the backup center. They'll need a backup guard, and so it's just a question of whether that'll be Manning or Ismail, in my opinion. And so it's just a matter of who do they like more out of those two.
And then, you look at it and you've got just an interesting, depth chart in general. I mean, we knew the offensive line, nothing kind of surprising there, but Ertz is listed as the number one tight end. But they haven't definitively said if he's playing this week.
That's true. I'm guessing he will, but he might be eased in there, so we might see a lot more McBride, which leads us to the Elijah Higgins thing. The fact that because they clearly like Blake Whiteheart when they guaranteed the amount of money that they did coming out of Wake Forest. I wonder where Higgins was on their draft board, because that dude's kind of intriguing.
Do you think there's a possibility? Athletic. Do you think there's a possibility that they just where did they end up? Where did he end up going?
Miami.
Oh, I know. I meant what round?
Sixth round.
So, looking at it, did they not pick after that or before that?
Let me see.
I'm going through it right now.
I guess we probably should have,
Well, no, they took so Elijah Higgins 197. So before that, they picked Kittrell Clark, who's starting. So I mean, and then they took Dante Stills because Higgins didn't get to him. So I mean, I don't think that's a bad thing. You look at
that's kind of and the fact that 5 teams tried to claim him. That tells you something that there's something intriguing about him as a number 4 tight end, I guess. Because isn't he a touch? He's slightly undersized for tight end, right? Just like more of the H-back build. But
yeah, he's definitely more H-back at 6'3", 235, but he's
incredibly athletic.
Yeah, super athlete, 4'5", 40, 35-inch vert, 10.6 broad, 7.0 cone, 3 cone, which is what the problem is. He's not necessarily a guy that's going to move laterally extremely well, but he's a guy that can get vertical extremely well, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then obviously with the body type, it just makes him that much more of a dangerous target. And so, it's always interesting when they make these calls, because like you said, Whiteheart was a little bit bigger, a little less athletic. So they probably just had a higher grade on Higgins coming out and then had the opportunity to grab him, right?
Yeah, and which means is also they kept all their draft picks, although Gaines is out for the season, and then the Gaines is out, and who else was in their draft pick? And Garrett Williams is on NFI, so they've got 7 on the roster, but then they added a couple of rookies on top of that, with 6 players. I guess they claimed 7 players off.
They claimed
Starling Thomas, the cornerback, as well. I forgot to. So they claimed 7 players off of waivers, and so Manning is a rookie, an undrafted rookie. Thomas is an undrafted rookie, and so that's
and DeMarcado.
And then they added DeMarcado, and then they've got again after they had 3 undrafted rookies on the roster on the 53 initially. Now they've got another 3. They've got 3 again on the roster, plus an additional rookie in Higgins that was a draft pick as well. So they've got quite the group of players there. The Thomas pick for me is the most intriguing of the group. Because why? I mean, they already had 5 cornerbacks on the roster. I'm like, what is the, unless...
what's the plan?
Because what Jeff Risden told me about Thomas is that super handsy in coverage, but pretty looked like he was going to carve out a spot on the 53 for Detroit for a special teams play. And I wonder if that's why they got him. Or, I mean, because that makes 3 rookie cornerbacks that they have on their team. If you include Williams, you've got Keitrell Clark, now you've got Thomas. And I'm guessing they want him for special teams, but when you've already got a guy like Chris Boyd on your roster for special teams, for me it kind of felt like it was an odd selection unless, and I guess we'll find this out on Wednesday, if one of those cornerbacks pops up on the injury report. I just thought of that, like, well, maybe it's not a 4-week injury, but like a week or 2 injury.
Yeah, and that could make sense. I mean, where you just have a guy that's potentially hurting, and so you just need to add somebody. I like that thought.
The Kayvon Wallace, that was the most that was the most predictable waiver claim, having played in Philly, and the fact that he is, special teams guy, would know the system. And then on top of that, they kept 2 safeties on the practice squad, Andre Sachere, formerly of the Eagles as well, and then Javonte Moffett as well. And so they have guys they'll call up. I wonder if today's transaction wire has the protections on it, like they did last year. I'll have to take a look. I forgot about that. Was usually on Tuesdays last year, is the practice squad protections. And so, yeah. Now, about the depth chart, is there anything that surprises you out of that? Because to me, it was super predictable. The whole Josh Dobbs or Clayton Tune vibe. Come on, stop that. But that Paris Johnson is starting right tackle, knew that. That, in fact, it is Michael Wilson listed as a starting receiver. And Keitrell Clark, starting cornerback.
I will say I was a little surprised by that.
You thought Pascal would be that?
I not necessarily that he would be the starter. I didn't know what to expect, and then that happened, and yeah, it's just it shouldn't surprise anybody. I mean, let alone surprise me. But like the way they had talked about Pascal all camp, it's not like he had done anything wrong.
No. And I think this more says about the off season that Wilson had.
Yeah, no, you're right about that 100%. It was just an interesting decision to go that route. But, like you said, Michael Wilson's worked really hard. He's put up a really impressive offseason all around. And, he's a guy that we talked about. Like, this is one of those classic guys that basically needed the right spot after college.
And to stay healthy, cross fingers,
yeah, I mean,
that he doesn't
obviously,
break another
yeah.
bone.
Yeah. That's the thing, is it's not a soft tissue injury after injury. It's been like
it's been
weird,
bones.
Broken bones.
which also to me is also kind of a wait a minute.
Yeah. Well, it would if it was like one bone, and maybe that's it. Maybe you're worried, like, hey, does he have brittle bones? But yeah, I mean, it's just an interesting thing. But yeah, so we'll see how this all plays out. I think it's gonna be spoiler alert. We do 5 questions with the managers of the other SB Nation site, as I'm sure you guys do with yours.
Do, in fact.
And so we sent over ours already for this week, and they've responded. And, one of the things that we have to ask about is who do you have winning the game, right? Like a gambling question, if you will, because this is all done by DraftKings, not a sponsor on this podcast, but,
but if they wanted to be.
Right, exactly. But And so, that was just one of the questions, and the the Commanders guy, without hesitation, 31-7.
Ooh,
I mean, nobody respects the Cardinals. Like, they're
ooh.
not like, oh, it's Sam Howell's first game as a starter, and it's Eric Bieniemy's first game as like the head play caller. Like, let's see how. No, they're like the Cardinals are a joke. It's not gonna. And so that's the thing, is like the expectations are so low that getting over them is going to be easy. Like, and we're not even talking about the Cardinals winning. I mean, something we might.
No, we're talking about a demolishing, and this coming from a team that is projected to score the fewest points in the NFL. If the Commanders score 31 points and end up being a team that averages 18 points a game, woof, this defense. Although I will say I'm not bullish, but I am cautiously optimistic about the schematic soundness and discipline of the starting unit. Can they maintain it throughout the game if the offense doesn't do anything? I don't think so, but if the offense doesn't give the ball away, I think the defense could be not terrible.
Yeah, and so, you just look at the roster, you look at the depth chart, you look at the moves made, everybody looks at it as a tank, but nobody really has talked to the guys and told them that, hey, this is a tank job. So we'll see how it works out or doesn't, and what ends up happening in all of this.
How much playing time do you think Dennis Gardeck will actually get? Will he start and then have the fewest snaps among the outside linebackers, or do you think Gardeck will actually play a significant amount? That's the one thing, and who will actually, because it has Dimikagey behind him, but will we see a lot of Cameron Thomas and Zaven Collins as opposed to Collins and Gardeck? Even though we saw a decent amount of Collins and Gardeck in the preseason.
Yeah, and what is the expectation on rotations? That's kind of what I'm really intrigued by, is how they're going to work the rotations in, because like we kind of semi joked about, that starting stuff is just
it can be just window dressing,
right? It's just names on a paper. So
I remember A.Q. Shipley got credit for a start once when he was in the game as a fullback.
Right.
On the first play of the game. So he gave him a start.
So yeah, and they tend to do that, right? Like especially with veterans, they'll be like, hey,
Well, I'll take the example 2 years ago with Isaiah Simmons when his playing time was still kind of limited. They always made sure he was in the starting lineup. I think that was a hey Steve Keim, he's starting. And that he wouldn't be in there. We're talking 2 years ago, like before last year when he was expected to do a whole lot more. But even his rookie year, the very first game, he started the first game and then, had bad leverage on the 75-yard touchdown play from that running back that I can't remember the name of for the 49ers that went to Miami and gets hurt all the time. But yeah, that sort of thing. But and even said, isn't it normally the case that when you look at the defense, like for rotation purposes and not injury, it's really only the front five, right? Because unless you have specifically an inside backer that you want to come in for coverage, you usually are only rotating the defensive interior guys once, swap out the nose tackle for a slot corner. But the guys like at inside backer, cornerback, and safety, those guys typically don't come off the field other than for specific package changes, while edge guys and interior defenders will rotate because of, fatigue.
Yeah, and we look at it and you kind of just look at snaps played in general, and the Eagles are a tough one because Kaiser came in, I want to say, halfway through the season-ish and became like the full-time guy. But like, you look at it like Marcus Epps, their strong safety, so Buda Baker is going to play most of the snaps. James Bradbury, Darius Slay, their corners played most of the snaps. So you assume Marco Wilson and I guess Kittrell.
That's what it looks like. That's what it looks like. Because Antonio Hamilton was listed as the first team guy all the preseason. Now Clark is the guy on top. And though I'm betting, not actually betting, but I would imagine that Hamilton will be their nickel guy based on the fact that they only have 3 safeties on the roster. So the plan is Hamilton plays the slot, JT and Buda stay back.
And then TJ Edwards played, 95% of the snaps. So that'll be Kaiser White in this defense. And so you look at it, Buda, the corners, Kaiser, and then you look at the rest of it and it kind of makes sense. I mean, we talked about Kaiser in that defense. That's not going to happen unless it's Woods, right? Unless Woods struggles or, gets injured. But Hassan Reddick, obviously likely a better pass rusher than anything the Cardinals have, right? He still played less than 75% of the snaps. So is that the expectation? And obviously he's playing a different role.
Right. And in most 4-3s, right, you have one of your 3 backers usually come off for nickel, right? As opposed to the 3-4 where you take the nose tackle. That way you both end up still with the 4-man front.
Right. And so you look at it, their defensive ends basically split time. So Josh Sweat and Brandon Graham basically split time. They played combined about 95% of the snaps. And then their defensive tackles in Hargrave and Cox, again, the Cardinals don't have that. Let's just be, they played about 65% of the snaps. So you look at it and you're saying, okay, like those all are going to get reduced down, but that all makes sense. I mean, you just kind of look at it and you say, okay, well, while he's not playing the Hassan role, he'll probably play the Hassan snaps, right? 75% of the snaps. You'll probably see Kaiser in the Edwards role 95% of the snaps, and then it's just a lot of health staying available where you talk about the safeties and corners and go for and the other line the other starting linebacker and go from there. It'll be interesting how those so like is Gardeck and Gardeck and Thomas, are they gonna play the Sweat Graham like 50-50 role? Like that's what's going to be interesting to me is like how those are all going to look.
Like how much Ojulari is going to play. Where does Demikeji play more? Is he more special teams? A lot of that's super. What do you think? Do you think of the interior guys? Do you think Collier probably plays the most?
Yeah, I would. So I'm kind of looking through their stuff, kind of just at like, so Marlon Tuapolo 2 and Jordan Davis. And I'm not comparing Lucky Fotu to either of these guys, but they played 20% of the snaps each. So thinking that maybe Lecky plays 40% of the snaps, because like Linval Joseph came in late for them last year. He only played 8 games, and in those 8 games he played 38% of the snaps. So he played a lot of, so that makes sense. And he was their nose tackle. So I'm guessing we're going to see Lecky right around the 40% mark. Whereas, like you said, Cox and Hargrave, that's going to be the Collier and Ledbetter role. So those guys were more in the 65% range.
And I would bet Ledbetter would play even less than they do.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So yeah, you'll probably see Collier in that 60 to 70% range. So 65%. And then Lecky right around 40%. And then I would guess Ledbetter would probably see 35 to 40%.
That sounds reasonable. Definitely.
So yeah, so like that's just what I'm interested in, because I mean, you look at it again, you have to factor in a lot of things. When did they come on the team? So Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh, in in the scheme of the season, they only played like 17% of the snaps, but in their time, they were playing about 40% of the snaps. And again, I'm not comparing Jonathan Ledbetter to Ndamukong Suh, but that role will probably be about 40% of the snaps. So you're going to get 40% from Ledbetter, 40% from Lecky, and then you get that 65% from Collier ideally, and then you flush it out from there with guys getting about 20% each after that. So that'll just be kind of how it all plays out, I'm guessing, and we'll see. I mean, again, we'll see how it goes, but yeah, I mean, outside of really just the inside backers, the safeties, and the corners, I'm really interested to see what that up front rotation, because that's only 6 guys. So the other 5 guys, what does that rotation look like, and who are the again, not comparing abilities, but who are the Hassan Reddick, who are and the Javon Hargrave of this defense in terms of reps.
Coming up next on the Rise Up Zero podcast, the best of Cardinals talk on the web. Let's move ahead and talk about the captains. The Cardinals have 6 new captains. Some of them aren't so new. That's coming up next on Rise Up Sea Red. We're back on the Rise of Sea Red podcast, best of Cardinals talk on the web, talking about captains. The Cardinals named their captains, and I find this interesting because not being in the locker room, I'm going to ask you this. Gannon named captains. How often in the pros do you think that a coach names them as opposed to the players voting? Because I know that in years past, at least some of them, I think under Arians, that players voted for captains as opposed to being selected. And Gannon selected these captains: Kyler Murray, DJ Humphrey, James Conner, Budda Baker, Kaiser White, Dennis Gardeck. Basically 3 guys on offense, all 3 completely you would expect to be the captains: Kyler, DJ, Connor. Defensively, Budda, Kaiser White makes sense, even though he's a newcomer here. Gardeck, Baker, Humphreys, and Kyler have been captains 4 straight years now, and Connor is a captain for the 2nd year rope. But maybe I didn't pay enough attention to this, but how common is it, do you think, that a coach selects them as opposed to players voting for them?
That's a fair question. That's something I should have looked up before we started this whole thing, because it's interesting to see how that works out. See how that works out and see the way Gannon operates. And, like you said, there wasn't any shock, right? Budda and Kaiser, right? I mean, that was obvious from jump. And then on offense, as much as it pains people, Kyler is one of the guys. So we'll see how that all kind of works out, and what the plans are, if it works. But I think most teams vote for it, if I remember right.
That would make sense to me. But like, doesn't it feel like Gannon had coached a college team? The things he does would make a lot of sense, right? And I'm going to keep drawing Jim Harbaugh comparisons. I really see a lot of Jim Harbaugh in Gannon, only less like seemingly more player friendly, like
less abrasive, or I can say it, just less of an asshole, if I'm honest.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing. But yeah, I love the fact that we keep seeing this. Now, Kyler has been the captain for 4 straight years now, which, when we get to the next segment, seems kind of stupid. If Kyler's not going to play, why would he be selected a captain? And I think we need to continue to talk about the fact that this new coaching staff, that Gannon is praising effusively Kyler as a teammate, Kyler being present, Kyler being active in team meetings and offensive meetings, to show that either his lack of such was more related to the toxic situation around him that he just didn't want to invest, or that narrative was simply false.
Yeah, and it seems like a lot of this came from the previous regime and not necessarily Cliff. And I've been told, and I've said it on this show, that one of the bigger issues that started to rear its head, I guess is the best way to put it, was the fact that, and we've talked about it a million times, Cliff was very much hey, we're all adults. Like, do you do your thing, like you do your job, and I'm not going to worry about you, and I'm not going to worry about them and things like that. And right, wrong, or other, everybody's got their opinion. Kyler began to have trouble with what was going on in terms of the front office. And again, we can agree, disagree, it doesn't matter. But whether it was Isaiah Simmons, whether it was Rondell Moore, like there were decisions that Kyler probably shouldn't have stuck his nose in. I mean, I'll say that, but also that he's, in hindsight, been proven that he was probably right as well. And so, that dynamic in that relationship, when Cliff is like, I'm not getting involved, basically, right? Like, that's, I'm just here to coach. And then you have the issues. It's going to sour somebody. And we've seen that there seems to be a singular person who's working their way through the media to try and change the what's the word I'm looking for? Like what people think of him, whereas the other guy has been more behind closed doors working to change the perception of him. And so, those are just, yeah, it's just different. It's unfortunate that that's how it ended, but we moved on. But, one of those guys in that situation is still working or going through the media, telling a story and getting what he believes is his version of the truth, or he doesn't believe, but what he believes is his version of the truth out there, while Kyler's version is different. And that's how it always goes, right? Like there's always two versions, and probably the truth is usually somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, totally. But the captains all make sense. I wouldn't have picked, honestly. I don't think I would have gone through and picked anyone else differently than they had.
I was going to ask, were you, I mean, I'm surprised is not the right word, but were you surprised that like Paris didn't get the nod?
No, No. Like a rookie lineman, I think that would be an exceptional case to have a rookie lineman get named a captain, especially in a room with, look at the veterans they have. They've got Will Hernandez, they got Elijah Wilkinson, they got DJ Humphreys. And DJ has been a captain. He's been basically the voice of the offensive line for, well, heck, and you even got Kelvin Beachum as well. I think Paris Johnson as a captain would have been a huge surprise to me.
Okay. I was just curious what your thought process was on it.
I think in this case, in terms of selecting captains, I think Gannon he doesn't need Paris to be a leader. He needs Paris to be a kick-A right tackle, working his tail off, and that would be and to earn some more like that. Yeah, I guess that would make sense, and I kind of like it. I kind of like that because Gannon kind of said he has a plan. There's a reason why he picked captains. He explained those reasons, and part of it was for those particular players to do particular things. And so I love how seemingly intentional. Personally, I have a personal philosophy of intentional living, and Gannon's intentional approach to coaching I really like.
Yeah, that's one of the things we've talked about is just, and, I can, again, just talking and trying to learn, one of the things you do as a coach, and you do it as a teacher, and I do it, in my day job, is you try to get better. If you're good at what you do, let's say it this way, if you're good at what you do, you continually try to get better and evolve, right? And that's one of the things that I think Gannon does a lot, is that he wants to be a great coach. He desires that. And so he puts himself in a position to teach and take the responsibility on. And if it doesn't work, he at least knows that he put in the effort and the time and the energy to get them there.
Yeah. It's I like it. Coming up next on the Rise of Sierra podcast, Special Cardinals Talk on the Web. Let's talk about our last segment, which is a couple of things. One, another rumor about Kyler Murray not playing, and what is going on with the stuff that's coming out about Steve Keim. Coming up next on the Rise of Sierra. We're back on the Rise of Sierra podcast, Special Cardinals Talk on the Web. I will say I don't want to give it too much credence, but because it kind of caught fire, guys like Pat McAfee were talking about it, Mike Florio was talking about it. Here comes again that the Cardinals would sit Kyler Murray for the entire season to avoid, those injury
potential
guarantees.
Injury, yeah.
And I'm just like, why? Why would the message be that to me it just seems absurd across the board. Why would the message be all summer, Kyler Murray working his tail off to get back on the field? Kyler pushed, this is something Kyler's been pushing, the team has been pushing. He's named a freaking captain. And then the notion that they're just going to sit him. If things are bad, they're like, no, we're going to do that. We're going to move off of it. This is not the sound of a team that's moving off of Kyler Murray. Are they in a position where they could? Certainly they could. But I'm going to say it's going to be really hard. They could, but it's going to be hard because if Kyler's good, why would you trade him? And I'm going to keep saying this. As great as Caleb Williams looked, guess what? You know who looked just as good in that exact same offense? It was Kyler Murray in 2018. So, what you're hoping Caleb Williams could be is what Kyler Murray is, right? And why would you move off of the original? unless he's declined as a result of injury. But if he's declined because of injury, he's going to be impossible to trade as well, which the Cardinals leave in a bet. So they have really no other choice than have Kyler Murray perform, and they need Kyler Murray to play so that they can have that faith moving forward. And if he's healthy and they sit him, guess what? Everything that's been good on the offseason with this new coaching staff will have been wiped out completely. Kyler will be a very, very upset player and will want out.
Yeah, and And again, you've talked about it too. Perceptions, big, creating the right atmosphere for this organization is important. And, you know, if they don't think Kyler can play or lead anymore, then I'm fine with moving on. That's something that they have to do for the organization to try to get better, right? But if they're just going, oh, this is, the cheaper route to go and we just need to go, then I feel like you're doing this organization a disservice, because like you said, the unknown, and let's be honest, the history of drafting quarterbacks for this team, it's not like you've ever done it better than Kyler. Like
Right.
the only good quarterbacks they've had have been veterans on their last leg. I mean, outside of Neil Lomax, right? Like, and that was still St. Louis.
Right. And yes, that was, Neil Lomax was fantastic. I never got to watch his fantasticness. They drafted Jake Plummer, Jim Rosenbaugh. That didn't work out. They drafted Stoney Case. He was nothing. They brought in backup after retread, after unproven guy. Chris Chandler, Tom Tupa, like Jay Schrader, Steve Berline. Everyone that, like, basically any quarterback that was on the cusp of being a start, Chris Chandler, or they brought in the old guys, Boomer Esiason and Dave. This is ridiculous. Then they drafted Jake Plummer. And Jake Plummer was one of the best young quarterbacks I've ever seen. And look at his numbers. His numbers are terrible. Terrible. He was terrible statistically for the Cardinals. And I loved him. One of my favorite players of all time, mind you. Jake Plummer. Incredible.
Yeah.
And then when he went on to Denver and to be very, very competent. But then after that, you've got Josh McCown. You've got retreads like Sean King. Matt Leinart showed promise and then fell off everything. Kurt Warner comes in. Derek Anderson was no good. They traded for Kevin Kolb. John Skelton flashes for a little bit. They Carson Palmer. He's great. They draft other guys. They don't. Josh Rosen. Yeah, Kyler's like, and if we look at statistically, Kyler's already like a top 3 or 4 quarterback in this franchise's history. And that is so bad, but it's also so good. Like, why do you want to move from that?
And you have him, and he's already outside the top 5 in money. Allen signed his deal, right? Did Josh Allen sign his new deal?
I'm pretty sure yes.
I'm double checking. But yeah, so Allen, yeah.
Heck,
yes, he signed his new deal.
Even
yes.
Daniel Jones, for crying out loud.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. You look at the numbers and you look at the names, like, you're paying Daniel Jones $40 million. So if you're going to pay Daniel Jones $40 million, paying Kyler $45. So again, unless you're going to say like, hey, we're going to go spend that. Here's my thing to the people that want to get rid of Kyler from the financial aspect. And I'm going to say this politely. When has this team ever intelligently spent money? Now, I know it's a different regime. Okay. So I get that. So we haven't seen this regime, but when has being flush with cash ever worked out in this franchise's favor? And I'm not saying that just give Kyler all the money and not worry about it. What I'm saying is this isn't something that we see often. We don't see the Cardinals in a position where they have, the young quarterback and so what they had with Kyler and it not working, if you do that again with Caleb Williams next year, the clock starts over and you have 3 or I guess 4 years. No, 3 years, because that's when Kyler signed his, right? After 3 years. So the clock starts over again immediately in 3 years. Are we assuming that this team is going to be ready to contend immediately next year or with a rookie? So you get Caleb Williams. I mean, even best case scenario,
He's Kyler Murray as a rookie.
right? He's Kyler Murray. He's Joe Burrow. Wait, Joe Burrow was 2-7-1, right? Like he wasn't any good. I mean, his stats weren't bad, but like that's what I'm saying. It's such a toss up, and then if it happens, you're immediately on the clock. That rookie contract puts you on the clock, and now you're making moves to get things done in that 3 or 4 year time frame before you have to pay the next guy. And so it's like, well, you've got this guy under contract, you've got him in a now situation where he's going to be a top 8 quarterback, maybe 10 in terms of contract. Like that, those change literally yearly. Like he's just gonna, by the time he starts actually making money or counting against the cap, yeah, he's 7th right now. I just looked right now. He's 7th. Like, is he a top 7 quarterback right now? No, that's fine. But the guys in front of him are, I mean, the guys around him, he's in the mix with Deshaun Watson, Dak Prescott, Matthew Stafford. Like he's in the mix with those guys. And again, your next options are 40 million in Daniel Jones, Derek Carr, or 35 million in Jared Goff. Like those are your next options. So it's not like you can just be like, oh, we're going to get Caleb Williams and then immediately we're going to be good. Because that's just not
doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. And
it's just not how it works. So like
no.
I feel like we've been fans long enough to say like okay.
Andrew Luck with Bruce Arians was like the exception that year, and then, as a rookie when they won 12 games, and you don't get that from rookies. Like even Peyton Manning was terrible. Like statistically his first year, they lost games. They lost so many games. Troy Aikman's rookie year, terrible. Cowboys were awful. And like rookie quarterbacks go through bad, they're usually on bad teams. You don't get a good rookie quarterback on a good team.
Right. Well, and you had Trevor Lawrence 2 years ago. I mean, 3-14, led the league in interceptions. Last year comes back 25-8. And now they're loaded up. They're trying to make a run for things, right? And because they're on the clock. And so like how Jacksonville handles it, things like that. Like everybody's like just assumes like, oh, you got to be like San Francisco. Well, San Francisco has been lucky, if anything. And guess what? That's all coming due next year. So like next year, their situation's super untenable. So it's one of those situations where you have to just understand that these guys or teams, it's about the organization. And if you're able to create a stable organization that allows you to win, then everything falls into place. But if it's literally just like, hey, we have a 3-year running clock to get something done, well, then you're going to be disappointed because it's very unlikely that you're going to reach that goal in those 3 years, or you will. And again, you and I wouldn't complain, but then you're the Rams, right?
And guess what? You know who's the team that's going to end up with Caleb Williams, right?
The Rams.
It will be the Rams. It most certainly will be the Rams. Interesting thing that came around, Michael Lombardi was on, was it Pat McAfee, talking about the Cardinals and Kyler Murray and the kind of the situation, and somehow threw out there the idea that the Cardinals always, like basically Steve Keim wanted Kyler Murray in 2019, and as a result of that, going into the draft, going into that offseason, they hired Cliff Kingsbury because they wanted Kyler Murray. I do not know where Lombardi gets that information. If that is information that he just made up, or if this was, Steve Keim or a friend of Steve Keim feeding Lombardi that narrative, because that narrative is absolutely atrociously bad. And if you follow the Cardinals, we know that's not the case. Steve Keim wanted nothing to do with Kyler Murray. He said it himself. He didn't even look at Kyler Murray tape until after the combine, when he knew that Kyler was going to be in the draft. And he didn't want Kyler. He had just drafted Josh Rosen. They hired Cliff Kingsbury to fix Josh Rosen. That's what they talked about in the interview. They talked about Josh Rosen and what they needed to do for him. And Keim basically said Kyler forced him to draft him because he was so good. This was a guy who wanted to draft Nick Bosa. They wanted Nick Bosa. They wanted Josh Rosen to be the future of the team, and Kyler's tape was just too good. It's that nonsense. It's hogwash. Keim was not the reason. They did not hire Cliff Kingsbury because of Kyler. They hired Cliff Kingsbury because they wanted an offensive coach.
Right, and so, and that's what I was alluding to earlier. This is the Steve Keim tour where he's able to basically try to recreate history to make him look better than he has looked. And I get it. I mean, like, at the end of the day,
Kyler was drafted by Keim, but it wasn't because that was the whole plan to begin with.
No, and the last couple of years were bad, and I get that, and it was tough, and you're trying to work back through it. But at the end of the day, like, it is what it is. And you just, I mean, you had your chances and you fell short. You made wrong decisions and moves. And one of the guys that we've known for years, I think he even might have written for you at one point, Kent Hoder, talks about it all the time.
Yeah. Kent wrote briefly with me back when I was running your site.
Yeah, and he talks about it all the time. This is what and what you get's a strong phrase. I don't mean it in that way, but this is what you get when you chase the ghost of Darrell Washington for a decade. Because that's literally that's what he was doing. Let's be honest. Like, he found a unicorn, and he just never gave it up after that. Like, he couldn't give it up. And that's the thing, is, like, as a GM, not that you and I have ever done it, obviously, but as a GM, like, you have to be able to say, like, oh, those were mistakes. And then you have to also look at the NFL, where the NFL is and how it's trending or where it's trending, and say, oh, all these other teams that are good aren't wasting first-round picks on linebackers, off-ball linebackers. They draft pass rushers and now, wide receivers and these things. Maybe we should look at doing that. But it was just, that's what I said.
Let's draft pass rushers to become off-ball backers.
That's right, exactly. So, it's unfortunate, but it's also, are you going to take the word of the guy that's not working now, that's doing the media rounds to try to kind of fluff himself back up, or are you going to use your eyes and ears of what we actually know happened? And that's let's be honest. Like I said, like we started the show with, 8 million views on a
tweet
snippet. 39,000 people actually watched the video. So, like, it's much easier to be like, oh yeah, Steve Keim, genius for a long time. I wonder, but Kyler Murray ruined his career and cost him his job. It's like, no, that's not how it went down.
Yeah. And with that, we will wrap up this edition of the Rise Up Syria podcast, Best Hour of Cardinals Talk Web. This is episode 457. We're going to try and find the schedule now to hit 2 or 3 shows a week. We'll record again Thursday night talking about Cardinals Commanders in week 1. And I hope to have a Commanders writer reporter guest later in the week as well. That's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. Thanks for listening. As always, we'll be back again soon.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up, See Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be red, see red, and of course, rise up, see red.